Okay, for City of God here today, I wanted to start with the definition of a favela, which is basically a slum in Brazil. So slums are something that have existed forever, and I think what kind of is hard for maybe the US listener to get their head around is we always think of slums as poor, rundown inner city areas, and those are the slums. And what you have here in Brazil, and I'm sure other places around the world too, but Brazil is actually kind of the opposite. So this favela, and specifically the City of God favela outside of Rio de Janeiro, they're basically suburban slums. So all the people who can afford to live in the city live in the city, and it kind of forced the poor people out to these poor suburbs that they set up so that the city itself was kind of kept nicer.
Yeah, it's kind of the opposite of how you would think about it. Normally you think about like a poor, inner city area, but this is like, oh, you can't afford to live here, beat it, get out of town. And it's like way out of town. I think they even show there's a couple shots where you can see, I mean, you can't really see like the Christ the Redeemer statue. Like you can't make it out, but you can see the mountain where it is, like really far away.
Oh wow!
That's lit up maybe at nighttime or something. Like it's far away.
So it's like they're not even in Rio. Yeah. So wanted to do similar though to what we did last week with Killing Fields and give a rundown of Brazil. We have been to Brazil before, not you and I personally, but on this podcast. Or at least the Amazon and stuff. When you look at films like Aguirre, The Wrath of God, and even something like Embrace the Serpent was Colombia, but it definitely dealt with a similar part of the world to what we saw going on in Brazil. So again, you don't have a lot of historical records of all this, but humans have been here, obviously, since they kind of populated North and South America. But there was over like 2,000 tribes in Brazil when the Portuguese conquered it around 1500. And at that time, they showed up, but then they really didn't mess with it for a few decades. They were too busy dealing with all the stuff in Asia, and we even kind of got to some of that with like a silence, but they were making more money over in Asia.
Oh, okay.
But around 1530s, they started colonizing Brazil kind of more in earnest. And then that quickly led to things like sugarcane plantations and African slaves being brought over to Brazil. And then you have the Jesuits coming in and did advocate for humane treatment of the natives and brought Christianity to the country. And in the 1560s, Rio de Janeiro was founded. And the other thing I found interesting here, too, we flash forward a few hundred years, and I didn't realize this until just today. So when Napoleon was doing his thing in Europe, the Portuguese king was kind of nervous, and so I'm going to escape over to Brazil because that's essentially just, that's our colony. So I'll basically be safe in what's still Portuguese territory, but way over in Brazil. And then once Napoleon was kicked out, Portugal was like, oh, hey, it's, go ahead, come on back to your country. And he basically said, no, I'm good here in Brazil. In fact, it's just Portugal now too. So like Brazil and Portugal are both just Portugal and they're equal. Like Brazil is Portugal. So I'm just going to stay here in Brazil, which is also Portugal.
It'd be kind of like if like Napoleon went to like Algeria and was like, yep. No, I'm good here. Like, this is also France, so...
Right. Yes, very similar to that, but much farther away. And then they actually got to the point where Rio de Janeiro became the capital of Portugal.
Oh, that's crazy.
And so it was like the only European capital not in Europe.
Yeah.
So, but eventually, though, the people in Portugal proper were like, no. So the king did kind of have to go back to Portugal, but then not long after, he left his son behind as kind of the regent in Brazil. And then shortly thereafter, and this is in 1820s, his son declares Brazil an independent nation with him as its first king or emperor. And then he goes back a little bit later to Portugal himself, leaves his young son behind, who's basically now the young king, and then becomes the king in his own right in Brazil until I think it was 1889, and then that's when an independent republic of Brazil was declared, and they kind of oust the monarchy, and it was more of a republic. Of course, Brazil's just been kind of, it definitely has a reputation for corruption and stuff, and actually, so what I'm going to do here, you look at the History of Brazil tab, and I can almost give you a rundown just by looking at the highlighted tabs as we kind of rush through here. So let's go. I'm going to start here. This is a little bit before the Portuguese kings. I was talking about. But basically, I'm just reading the headlines from the History of Brazil Wikipedia page. Gives you a nice, I think, rundown, or a nice summary. So, indigenous rebellions, sugar age, slave rebellions, gold and diamond rush, the kingdom and empire of Brazil, coffee plantations, rubber, and then you get the Old Republic, which is what I mentioned was 1889 to 1930. And then in 1930, it was more of a coup and revolution there. And then they had a military dictatorship from 1964 to 1985. And so the current era in Brazil kind of starts in 1985 when they kind of get back to democracy. And they are a democracy, but they've just definitely had a lot of strong men leaders. Of course, they also had a woman president too. But anyway, so it's just kind of a place that is rife with corruption, but also super rich culturally. You know, a great soccer tradition, and we haven't really got to the movie yet. But trust me, we're getting there. I'm just trying to lay the setting here for it.
And honestly, historically, it's probably better that we're doing this beforehand because, like, there's not a ton historically to really.
The movie's more about the reason this is on our timeline is because of the world it's giving us more than the story itself. Correct.
Yeah.
So. Well, I just watched a video on, and I guess I don't know why this didn't occur to me earlier. So the movie deals with these gangs in these slums on the outskirts of Rio de Janeiro, specifically a slum called the City of God or Cidade de Deus. But so cocaine, they deal with, they're obviously selling that in the movie, and that's big in South America. And so I just watched, right before we got on the phone here, I watched a YouTube video about how you get cocaine from the coca leaf. And I guess was just incredibly naive. In my mind, it was you dry up the leaves and then you snort them, and that's cocaine.
No, it's a huge chemical process.
Yes, it reminded me of Breaking Bad. Watching this 5-minute YouTube video where basically they're using everything from bleach to kerosene and everything else to basically. I don't even know. Somehow you are getting this chemical isolated from dried coca leaves, but you're having to use literally bleach and kerosene to get there, and it's messy, insanely toxic. And at the end of that, you kind of end up with this residue left over that is cocaine. And they didn't even discover it. So that's why they were chewing the leaves, for centuries. The natives would, kind of almost like treat it like tobacco, but it wasn't like having a cocaine reaction because it was so buried within the chemistry of the leaf itself, I guess. Yeah. And so it wasn't until the mid 1800s that they isolated it.
Did you ever watch the Netflix series Narcos?
Oh, no, I didn't. I've heard that's pretty good, though.
Yeah, so I've only seen the first season, and the first season is really good. I actually do recommend it. But there are like scenes, showing like the actual cocaine production operation. It's like, big stills of these leaves that, they have to, boil them and, add all these chemicals. And it's this whole process. Yeah.
The YouTube video I watched was interesting because it was like a Breaking Bad style lab, but outside in the middle of the jungle.
Yep.
And I'm like, this is fascinating. So they had dug this giant pit and they had filled it with chlorine water and then put all the leaves in that. And then, you're just processing it. Anyways, processing after processing after processing to end up with cocaine finally. So to the movie, this is a spectacular movie. This was I think at least the third time I had seen it, and it's kind of funny. So I first saw it not long after it came out. I probably did see it in 2003, and I remember thinking, "Wow, that is a really good movie." And then I rewatched it and was a little underwhelmed about 5 years ago or so. But then when I rewatched it for the third time for this, I was like, "Oh nope, this is brilliant filmmaking. This is a absolute classic." And just to kind of jump ahead, this is number 22 all time on the IMDb top list all time. It is a 91% on Rotten Tomatoes. It did get nominated for 4 Oscars, which for a Brazilian movie, that's pretty rare. Although Best Foreign Picture was not one of the nominations. So I think I remember Ebert kind of talking about basically what a travesty the foreign film nominations even are, because one of the best foreign films literally ever was not even nominated for Best Foreign Film, but it got nominated for Best Director, Best Cinematography, Best Editing, and Best Writing.
Which kind of a callback to our best movies of the decade, and also a shout out to your other podcast, Track Nerds. Go listen to that to hear us talk more about this. But the categories that this is nominated for, it is kind of like another one of those like blends of what you like and what I like.
Absolutely.
You know, it got the cinematography and the editing for the technical side, and then writing and direction.
Yeah.
It was usually, you know, what you like to see. So
yeah, and I would say, all that is definitely on force here, and this is just I don't even know where to begin because it's such a really good movie. You kind of just have to watch it, and it's good on so many levels. So like even just the opening scene of this movie, it catches you immediately. It's like a party happening. They are skinning some chickens for basically like this outdoor little barbecue party kind of thing. One of the chickens they haven't killed yet gets away and starts running down the street, and the camera's like following from like the chicken's eye view as they're chasing it.
Yep.
Of course, it's these gangbangers, so they're like running around after the chicken with their pistols, even though they're like teenagers.
Yep. And shooting at it.
Yes. And then like the cops end up kind of coming in from the other end. And then our main character is a young guy who's trying to avoid the gangs as best he can and has an interest in photography. And he's kind of caught literally in the middle. And we kind of see him frozen trying to get the chicken for the gangs, because you kind of do what they say within reason so they don't pick on you. But then the cops show up on the other side and he's kind of caught in the crosshairs. Then it cuts back basically a decade to the kind of the beginning of, basically the beginning, I don't even know what the beginning of. I guess his story, he's a little kid again now, and we see his brother getting involved with the gangs, and it's just stylistically, it's a kind of a Tarantino vibe, but it's enough different, it's not a Tarantino ripoff.
Yeah, no, it is a very unique style, and it has a lot of cool edits like that. And there's also some cool stuff as far as like unique camera movement. Mm-hmm. Like you have like the low to the ground handheld shots, like running next to the chicken that were, when you're watching it, like it's not on a dolly, like that's definitely someone running next to this chicken holding the camera, which is cool.
I didn't think about that. Yeah.
There's the cool editing. There's a scene in the movie when Lil Zay's friend, I think it's Bernard, the kid with the glasses, when he gets shot at that party.
Benny, yeah.
And it's like Benny, yeah. They have the disco. It's like a disco party kind of thing, and they have the strobe lights going on. And so you have like strobe lights in each shot, but then also it'll cut to black, and then that'll be like the cut. So it's like as the strobe is going, it's strobe light in each shot, but also the black is the cuts between the shots, which is really cool.
It kind of has this frenetic pace or whatever to it.
It's super disorienting, which, probably, that situation would be even without the strobe lights. And then there's like little stuff like I have here. When Rocket goes to Lil Zay's to take the photos, when they're trying to get the one redheaded kid to take photos of him, but he doesn't know how to work the camera, so they have Rocket come over and he's taking the photos, and there's this like shot it's like it's a one-off thing. It's only like 5 seconds. It's kind of out of nowhere, but it's like this really weird, cool camera movement where it shows basically his point of view, showing the guys with their guns and stuff like he's taking their photos, and then the camera pans, but instead of panning sideways, it pans up vertically 180 degrees, and then the next shot it's like upside down shot of Rocket holding the camera, and then it just cuts and it's like just goes on with the rest of the scene. It's like that was really cool. Very,
very innovative. And we haven't mentioned even where this kind of falls on our timeline. So in the present, I guess when he's kind of chasing the chicken is around 1980, and then when they do the flashback, it's kind of the late 60s, early 70s. So we're kind of in that time period. The bulk of the story, I would say, takes place around 1980 in the slum, but then we do get some backstory that was about 10 years earlier, and it's kind of just the two time periods.
Right. Well, because I think when they first go to, it's like the first scene when they're not kids anymore, when it's like, they're teenagers and they're on the beach, there is a thing that comes up on the screen that says the 70s.
Okay. But
then by the end, when you get to, the big shootout between the cops, basically the end that is also the beginning of the movie is that shot, with the chicken and everything. I think that is like 1980 or the early 1980s. So
okay. So yeah, it covers a lot of time. And what it does cool too is, well, many things, but it kind of highlights, and it's kind of almost the point of the whole movie, and because it buttons it at the end with this, but the succession of leadership within the slum as far as the gang control. And there's kind of these turf wars, and then also who's on top. And one of the neatest sequences is they kind of like call it like the history of the apartment. And they kind of just, the camera stays in one spot in this apartment as you go through.
That's such a cool scene.
Right, a few months or a few years of here's the guy that first had this apartment, was selling drugs out of it, and then his partner and his partner's friend, and then basically just goes through like a series of owners to bring us to the present, where our characters kind of get involved with the apartment.
Yep, and it's cool because it's like that's another really cool like editing scene. Because it's just one camera. It's almost shot like a oneer, like a long take. Because it just pans kind of back and forth, maybe 30 degrees worth of field of view, just going back and forth. But like obviously the people are going in and out of rooms and then like disappearing, and it's time is passing. Right. But it's the actual apartment itself is like nothing is happening. There's no like hard cuts. It's just the camera is just in the apartment. Yeah, this is such a good movie. Right. I love this movie so much.
Yeah, just from a filmmaking standpoint, it's just so engaging, and the character relationships and the characters themselves. So our main guy is kind of on the periphery of the gang. He knows a lot of people in the gangs, but he stays away from it in such a way that he's not a narc or anything. Obviously, if you try to bring him down or get him in trouble, you'd be in trouble too. But but the main gang guys are like you said, the Little Zay and Benny.
Yeah, Little Zay and Benny, and then the rival gang is run by a white dude with red hair named Carrot.
Yes, who's mostly okay with living and let live, but Zay wants to be in charge, and then of course how they bring in the whole what's the big guy's name?
Knockout Ned.
Knockout Ned. Oh, that's just how they bring in that story. So, like, Rocket and his buddy run into, quote, Knockout Ned on a bus, and then they even kind of say, we'll get to his story later. And then, of course, his story becomes this whole thing.
And it's cool how they introduce him, too, because they go on the bus, like, they get a gun from somewhere.
Probably Rocket's brother. It's the one from Rocket's brother, I think.
That's right. And it's broken. But they're like trying to just get some money, just to have money, to survive. And so they're going to knock over the bus. But then they get up there and they start talking to the dude, and he's super cool to them. He lets one of them go through for free because he knows they live in the same slum as him. And then he starts talking about how he does karate and he spent time in the military. And he's like, oh, I'm all about peace and love, but like if I have to, like I'll kick somebody's ass. And then, so they're like, all right, we're not going to rob this guy. We're not going to rob this guy. And then they go to a pastry shop and that they're gonna rob, but then like the cute girl like flirts with them and gives her her phone number. So then they're like, all right, well we can't rob this place. So then they end up in the car with that guy who's trying to get to Sao Paulo, and then they're like, oh yeah, nobody cool can be from Sao Paulo. We'll have no problems robbing this guy. And then he's super cool too. He's like, hey, yeah, you guys like weed? I got some weed in my glove box. Like, let's just smoke up. And they're like, all right, okay, yeah, we're not gonna rob this guy.
Yeah, we can't rob anybody because we just go around making friends with them instead. Yeah.
Yeah, they're just going around, and everyone they run into just happens to be super chill.
Yeah, just the evolution of Little Zay himself. We see him as basically this psychopath of like a 10-year-old. Like he's like fallen as like the wingman of these older guys that are going to like knock off a place, and he's supposed to be like their lookout and fire a gun if the cops are coming. Well, on their way out, they notice he's gone. They just leave without him, and they had tied some people up to rob him. Oh, the 10-year-old Little Zay had gone in and just killed the tied up people because he's a freaking psychopath.
But that's the way that and again, this is like, it would be so easy to just show that sequence of events in order, and it would, you would still be terrified of Little Zay. But the way that they show it is like, it shows the older kids robbing the place, and then they hear the gunshot. Right. And they're like, oh man, all right, there's somebody here, we got to get out of here. And so it shows them escaping, and it shows their whole, running away and everything. And it's almost like a passing thing, like, hey, let's steal this car. Where's Lil Zay? I don't know. I can't find him. Whatever. Let's get out of here. And, it shows this whole chase sequence. And then it does this like cut back to the motel, and like everyone's dead. And you're like, what the heck happened?
Oh, right, because they get in trouble with like the police or something, or they're like, you kill those people. They're like, what do you thought we didn't kill anybody?
Yeah, right. And they're like, well, as the audience, it's like, well, there was only one other person there with a gun, but it was a 10-year-old kid. Is the movie implying that this kid murdered all these people? And then, yeah, that's exactly what happened, because it shows this little kid, and he is laughing his ass off, shooting all these people that are tied up. like in the kitchen and, shooting all the patrons of this motel. And then it's also kind of interesting too, is kind of a cool way that they do this like tension thing, because you see him and he's got like sunglasses, he's got like a new shirt, him and his buddy are like counting all this money, and you're like, yo, Lil Zay's like, he's been like a pretty successful criminal, probably murdering a bunch of people, and it's Rocket's brother is running away from the cops, and he runs into these kids, and he's like, he has no idea that they've been doing this.
Right.
He has no idea that Lil Zay was the one that killed all these people, and he's like talking shit to him, steals their money, and you're like, as the audience, you're like, oh man, like he better be careful, because like Lil Zay's probably gonna kill him, but he doesn't know that. He just thinks, oh, I'm just talking to this little 10-year-old kid that has some money. I'm running from the cops. I'm just gonna take his money. He's a 10-year-old kid. What's he gonna do? Well, he murders him, is what he does.
Right. He kills Rocket's brother. Right. What I had thought about just now, and I don't know why I hadn't, but you could make a case that Lil Zay should be on the list of best all-time movie villains.
Yep.
With just how well developed he is, and like we see how he's actually as an adult, he's still probably like 20 years old, but he's so actually insecure with, he struggles with women, and he's just he's petty in so many ways, and just absolutely vicious.
But absolutely, he's ruthless. Yep, vicious. He is super insecure, especially dealing with girls, but and that's kind of what actually causes the whole war in the first place.
Right, because he wants Knockout Ned's girl, right?
Yep, he rapes Knockout Ned's girlfriend, and then Knockout Ned goes to Carrot because he's like, hey, you're the rival gangster to Lil Zay. I need your help to, basically kill this guy. Oh, because Lil Zay, and this is like one of the few moments of, I guess you would call it comedy.
There's definitely moments of levity throughout the movie.
Yeah, but this one's like really dark.
Okay.
Because after Lil Zay rapes Knockout Ned's girlfriend, Knockout Ned is sitting in the house, and he's, like, you can tell he's super traumatized, and he's talking to his brother, and he goes, I don't know why Lil Zay didn't just kill me. Basically, wondering aloud, why didn't he kill me, but also kind of saying, like, I wish he would have killed me type deal. And then it cuts to Lil Zay walking away, and he's like, wait a minute.
Why didn't I kill that fool?
Why didn't I kill that guy? And then they go back to the house, and you're kind of like, you kind of chuckle, and you're like,
right.
I kind of feel bad for laughing at that, but it is kind of funny.
It's almost funny how psychotic he is, and just how they portrayed it.
Yes.
It was humorously done, but you're right, it's dark.
And that is something that you would see like in a Quentin Tarantino movie.
Right.
It's like, yeah, I don't know why that guy didn't just kill me. And then he's like, yeah, why didn't I kill that guy? And they go back, and he ends up, he kills Knockout Ned's brother. So Knockout Ned then joins up with Carrot, and then they get they start like basically an arms race. They're just trying to buy the biggest and best guns, and they're just, it's just this huge war.
And then where our boy Rocket kind of then starts being able to make it out of the slum or make a name for himself is he does get in with one of the local newspapers, and actually one outside of the slum. And at first he's just kind of working there as essentially an intern, kind of mail boy kind of thing. But he's just a delivery boy,
right? But he's technically employed by the paper. So in his off time, he goes and hangs out in the photography lab where they develop the photos.
Right, so we can learn how that all works, because that's kind of his passion. And he ends up, after Lil Zay kind of recruits him to take some pictures, he wants them developed and gets them developed at the newspaper. The newspaper finds them and runs them, and then Rocket thinks he's going to get killed because he's going to put Lil Zay's pictures in the paper, and he wasn't told to do that, so Lil Zay's going to kill him. Oh, Lil Zay loves the publicity.
He loves it.
So now Rocket's a hero on both sides.
Yep.
The newspaper there was like, this access you have is unprecedented. This is amazing that you have this access. And then Lil Zay is like, I'm famous. So everybody kind of wins for a while. And then of course, things like kind of go down at the end, and the little kids turn on Lil Zay and take him down, right?
Yeah, well, that's like the whole...
The runts, or what do they call them?
Yeah, the runts, which you see them kind of throughout the movie. It's a group of little kids. Some of them look like they're, I don't know, maybe 5 years old.
Yes.
And then the oldest ones are like maybe 10.
Right.
But it's this group of kids who, in this gang war, basically it gets so... Lil Zay gets so desperate that he arms all these kids, gives them all guns, says, hey, as long as you fight for me and, kill Knockout Ned's guys, you can have these guns and, be part of my gang. Well, at the end of the movie, there's like a corruption scene where he pays the cops for something. I don't remember exactly what it was.
And Rocket's taking pictures of it. Yeah.
Yes, and Rocket's taking pictures of these cops, basically getting this payout from Lil Zay, and then so he basically pays him off because they're like, well, you're going to jail. Like, we arrested Carrot, we arrested you, you're going to jail forever. We can't have this gang war going on. Well, Lil Zay says, well, how about I just give you all of the money I have and you only arrest Carrot, and then I'll just be the only gangster in the city of God now. And they say, fine, whatever, give us all of your money. So he hands him a briefcase full of cash. And then Lil Zay basically gets the runs together and he's like, all right, we got to start doing some robberies so we can get my gang back to life. And they're like, your gang? No, this is our city now. And they shoot him.
Right.
They kill him.
Right.
This group of 10-year-olds.
Right.
And and Rocket's taking pictures the entire time. And then he has this kind of like this choice to make. Like, do I expose the corruption and, basically get my name out there, but also
burn every bridge in the city of God? Yeah.
Yeah, basically I won't be able to live here anymore because everyone's going to want to kill me. Or I can publish the pictures of Lil Zay, his body after he got killed, and I won't get the same, notoriety and fame as I would, but it's probably good enough to land me a job. And that's what he ends up choosing, is he gives the pictures of Lil Zay's body to the paper and he gets an internship. Yeah, and then the movie ends on the group of runts, these 5 through 10-year-old kids, talking about all the people they're going to kill.
Right.
And they probably will because they all have guns.
Right. But it just kind of then continues that cycle that we mentioned. It's basically 10 little Zays like we saw at the beginning, where they're all just now these psychopaths going around that are going to wreak havoc. Yep. No, it's like I said, it's a great movie, and it's a little tricky because like at the end of the movie, it basically says Rocket's real name, implying that that's the name of the guy in real life, but that's not the name of the guy in real life. So it's based on a semi-autobiographical novel by a guy not named what the name they give in the movie is. And so it's kind of complicated. Basically, I don't really understand who, because it's not a photographer, it's just a writer. So it's based off the guy who wrote the book. Paulo Lins wrote the book, and it is roughly based on his experiences living in the slum. But he's just a writer. He was not a photographer. So it was weird that the movie ended with that button as if this was a real life story.
Well, and they even show, Rocket, and then it shows, a picture of not the character, but like of an actual guy.
Right.
And then it shows like Lil Zay, and it's the same thing. And Benny, it's the same thing. And then they even show, there's the news interview with Knockout Ned in the movie where he's like, well, the police are only going after me. They never go after Lil Zay. Basically, I got, captured and, but they let Lil Zay do whatever he wants. But it looks like an actual news interview from the 70s, and it's not the character from the movie.
So my understanding is, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they just faked them that well. I thought those news clips were all real. Am I wrong?
They might be, but
okay.
I mean, so then how biographical?
Right. So you have the guy who wrote the book, but then there's also this photographer from the City of God who I think has very experiences similar to Rocket. So I think it's kind of maybe both. I would say the Rocket character might be an amalgamation between this actual photographer and the writer of the book. And then they obviously use these real life events and work them into the narrative.
So then like Lil Zay and Benny and Carrot and Knockout Ned they're all real? Like they're all real people?
Or at least there's real life equivalents to them.
Yeah. Because the interview with Knockout Ned that they show at the end is word for word the interview that they show with him in the movie, but it looks like an actual news interview from the 70s, like not from the movie.
And I think it is, but it's tricky because none of the characters in the film are linkable on Wikipedia, so it's not like they have Wikipedia pages. So if they're real, they're so small of real characters,
which makes me
and so it's kind of, honestly it's kind of tricky. I'm going to say that it's definitely populated with real characters, but they're not known. They
just change the names.
Yeah, or change the names, or there's people they're not known outside of this book and movie. Like
sure,
they have no reason to be talked or written about other than So as far as names go, I really don't. I mean, normally that's kind of what we're breaking down here, but I'm not really sure. And I did some Google searches, and that's where I kind of find that photographer. Andre Camara is the photographer, and I'm looking at his page right now. Again, there's a lot of good work. It says 20 years later, his images inspired the film City of God. But of course, you have the book that's independent from that. Because like the Wikipedia pages that talk about the film and the book don't mention that photographer, but that photographer's webpage mentions him as being the inspiration for Rocket. But why is that not on the Wikipedia page or the book page? Especially when the book says it's semi-autobiographical. So
yeah,
I don't have a good answer other than I just think we have to say that this is roughly inspired by actual events based on people who lived in this world. And some of the characters and stories maybe actually, I guess the slices of it happened. But, you know, the overall arching thing is just kind of like, obviously, a artistic rendering of it. But I mean, again, at the end of the day, this is just beautiful filmmaking. This is a very rewatchable movie, despite how dark it is at times, because it is so...
Yes.
It's just lively, I think might be the way to describe it. And just the frenetic pace that kind of throughout, and just the fascinating characters, great performances all around, just great filmmaking. I'll say it again. It's on the IMDb list, it's number 22 all time. And I'm kind of okay with that.
Yeah, and it's almost 20 years old, so it's, you know, it obviously has some staying power on that list.
Right. That's about all I had, because, again, this is more about, we kind of set the world that it lives in, and you really just need to watch this movie to get an idea of the world that these people lived in. Again, even though it's based on actual events, it's not based on what would be considered historical events, I guess might be the way to say it, which is weird.
Right.
Or they're not... so small. It's so small a story.
Yeah, it's the events in this movie really only affect the actual favela in which it takes place, not necessarily even like Rio as a whole. It's just like basically what happened in this one neighborhood over the course of a few years.
Right. It'd be like saying like who won the local football game on a Friday. That's not a historical event, but it actually happened.
Right. Yeah.
So
exactly.
It's something almost like that. So next week, we will be dealing with Afghanistan and the quagmire that has been for decades with Charlie Wilson's War.